we're going to kick off with our review of Wildcard.
Wildcard, directed by Simon West, is a full-on action thriller. The lead character in the film is a quiet, brooding security consultant in Las Vegas. We watch basically a rather long day in his life through which he wins and loses tons of money in a casino, bashes up a bunch of mafia goons, and generally walks around like a Robocop. The film stars Jason Statham in the main role.
You know, Mayank, I was a little put off by the whole premise of this film, so I skipped it and I watched something else, as you know. Well, Mayank, how was it for you?
Well, I think you did a very good job of making sure that you keep your brains intact and don't damage them too much by watching a film like Wildcard. But then, you know, I've seen it, and everything in life that we experience has its ups and downs. The down, of course, we already know. It has Jason Statham in it, which means he's basically going to play the same role that he's been playing for far too long now. He beats the hell out of a lot of people. He never uses a gun throughout the movie, so, you know, he could use any implement and beat them up, which is great. I mean, that we already knew. I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't go for the film. But there are great things that I also learned. One was blackjack. Now, I didn't know how to play blackjack until I watched this movie. They spend, you know, lingering moments, you know, minutes after minutes, trying to teach us exactly how he's going to beat the table or not beat the table in a casino in Vegas. And great. So, you know, without quite having to spend much money, I know how to make a lot of money from blackjack, just as the lead character doesn't. So the second thing I learned, Fahad, is that William Goldman is the writer of this film, not just the screenwriter, also on whose novel this particular film is based. So just in case our viewers are not too familiar, what we know William Goldman for is Butch Cassidy in the Sundance Kid. What we know him for is All the President's Men. More than that, for film buffs, I think what we know him for is that book he wrote called Adventures in Screen Trade, which is one of the finest books to have ever been written about film.
Almost a Bible of sorts.
Absolutely. And there we see his worst work ever. So, you know, I think that's also a learning curve in some form or the other.
Truly a wild card entry, and it hasn't done anything. The cards are stacked against him. Let's just move on to the next one, shall we? I presume it's a Peko for you.
Oh yes, it's a complete Peko. Just in case you want to learn blackjack, I'm sure there are better ways to do it. Perhaps YouTube.
From the streets of Chicago to far-flung galaxies whirling through space, Jupiter Ascending tells the story of Jupiter Jones, played by Mila Kunis, who was born with the stars predicting that she was destined for great things. Now grown, Jupiter dreams big, but wakes up to the cold reality of a job cleaning other people's toilets. Only when Kane, played by Channing Tatum, a genetically engineered ex-military hunter, arrives on Earth to track her down, does Jupiter begin to glimpse the fate that has been waiting for her all along. Her genetic signature marks her as next in line for an extraordinary inheritance that could alter the balance of the cosmos.
Well, here's a film that Fahad has seen and I haven't, and I'm very keen to know for various reasons. The first, of course, being that it's directed by Wachowski brothers, and they're always on a trip, sometimes a good trip, bad trip. What was it?
Well, Mayank, first and foremost, we have to amend that. They are no longer the Wachowski brothers, they are the Wachowski siblings. Larry Wachowski has had a sex change and has become Lana Wachowski.
Right. I stand corrected, yes.
So there we are. Now, this is a film that's keenly anticipated. Obviously, after the Matrix trilogy, you've had Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas, both of which have not worked at all financially. But you have to credit them for their vision, their integrity. It's a little bit of self-indulgent filmmaking, but this film really marks a pinnacle as far as self-indulgence is concerned. I mean, it is so derivative, unfortunately. You have almost Superman and Lois Lane kind of things where Mila Kunis is falling. Jupiter is not ascending but descending half the time in the film. And like Superman, you know, he comes and saves her. Channing Tatum plays this wolf man. He's half wolf, half man. And he's got these really funky rollerblades that he can fly through space in. And that's the best thing about the film. It's otherwise all downhill from here. And you've got Eddie Redmayne, who's nominated for an Oscar for Theory of Everything, playing the chief villain. And either he's speaking in a whisper like this, or he's screaming his head off. So it's an insane performance. It's so over the top. Some can say that it's inspired. I just thought it was bloody insane. Everything about it, it's Star Wars meets some, you know, films about organ harvesting and human harvesting and all of that. It's a merry mess. There's nothing original in there. And the performances are pretty pathetic. the mastery of the Wachowskis are as directors. Unfortunately, their screenplays writing skills are pretty damn pathetic, and maybe even William Golding would not be able to, salvage this. No, unfortunately, it's a disaster. If you're a die-hard Wachowski fan, you need to go and watch this. By all means, 3D theater, go for it, knock yourself out, but don't blame me.
The Boy Next Door, directed by Rob Cohen, looks at a middle-aged hot mom played by Jennifer Lopez who goes through hell once she falls for a young kid who moves in next door. The mom is also a school teacher. Her son's new best friend has the hots for her. They hook up. She feels uncomfortable with the whole situation, but the guy turns completely psycho on her.
Mayank, this sounds like Fatal Attraction for MILFs. Tell me.
How do I put this? You know, these are movies that make me, one, believe how, or realize how old I am. Or for two reasons. One, of course, is that's J-Lo, who used to be really hot, genuinely in her, teens perhaps, or in the early 20s when I was a kid, and now she's playing a mom. So clearly, even I've grown in those many years. And second, this is a genre that I would love to watch if I was in school, class 5, class 6. And this is this typical sort of B-grade film that hopefully comes with a lot of sex. I don't know what The Boy Next Door otherwise has a lot of sex scenes because we live under a different kind of regime altogether, and therefore, if everything has been snipped by the censor board, I wouldn't know any better. But this is what, gives Bollywood also the term B-grade Hollywood. These are the subjects that are picked up for little kids to go and watch, hopefully after school, bunking school, hopefully get in without quite, anyone realizing they're under 18. But hey, there's a market and good for them.
This really sounds like that dubious film that actually did a very good job at the box office, B.A. Pass. Is this anything like it?
Well, this is, if you were really looking for a Bollywood connection, something like a Dar or a Bazigar, because there's a boy who's going nuts, who's turning psycho. But the boy looks really good, and they shoot him almost like a woman. And J-Lo is J-Lo. So, I know that there is an audience for this.
Oh, sure. I mean, I stopped watching J-Lo after the year 2000.
You couldn't J-Lo after that, huh?
Waiting for Tonight. And, with that green laser, that iconic song at Y2K. After that, as you said, couldn't J-Lo her any further.
Well, on a more serious note, we're also bringing to you a documentary film that we'll be discussing called I Am Offended. On a serious note, only because it's turned into a serious issue now. The situation of stand-up comedians, which is a new thing so far as India is concerned in terms of English stand-up comedians, and sprouting all over the metropolitan cities. This film chronicles the entire phenomenon, and it's a phenomenal film for a lot of reasons. The first is that we've started finally making documentary films that sort of look at us as regular dudes who do regular things rather than on being always on an activist mode. Most of the Indian documentary films in the past were either films division or they were all pamphlets in some form or the other. I think very recently we started seeing films that sort of put together like a movie.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, my best film for 2014 was Katiyabaz, and that's saying a lot given that it was a documentary.
Yeah, and this one is directed by Jaideep Verma, whose last film that I saw was also quite interesting because it chronicled the art house / mainstream, non-mainstream cinema through the life and times of Sudhir Mishra, the filmmaker. This one is looking at what is turning out to be almost the spirit of the times. Young people going out there, having their say at bars, at regular restaurants, and what is considered stand-up comedy. Of course, a lot of it is derived from American humor. It's now in news for a variety of reasons, Fahad, and you would know better.
Oh, yes, I mean, terrible. I've just written a column in my Indian Express about this. The fact that they're coming down in this way, as you said, there's a new regime at the censor board. More and more we're finding that any kind of creative expression that goes beyond the pale of parameters is being questioned, is being silenced, and it's really a shame. So yes, this documentary is just so topical, and it couldn't have released at a better time.
We of course
need to
talk about the AIB and the roast that they did, that they themselves had to remove from YouTube. Hopefully, this particular film that is also talking about the phenomenon, in fact, stars a lot of actors who are part of the entire crew of AIB. Stars Sanjay Rajora, who I thought is a fabulous stand-up comedian from Delhi. Stars Varun Grover, who I think is one of the finest stand-up comedians based out of Bombay. So, it's a whole lot of metropolitan humor that they're looking at. Turns out to be a great film. also you have to realize that finally films are being released on YouTube to be watched by people. That's another platform altogether, and it's a great way to get your voice across, I think.
Precisely, and it's more the pity because a lot of these guys are friends of ours, and we've known them and seen them grow and come into their own, and it's just a voice that needs to be nurtured and nourished rather than being extinguished and gagged. And really, all the shame. Try and watch this film by all means as soon as you can. Wouldn't you say, Mayank?
Yes, I would agree. I mean, it's called I Am Offended. I think the very basis of comedy is to offend someone or the other. And if someone or the other is going to constantly get offended, and therefore we should stop having comedy, it's not going to make a better society for sure. So that's where we are so far as Friday Double Bill is concerned. I hope you're not offended by anything that we do on this show. And if you are, well, feel free to be offended. It's your right to be offended. It's our right to offend.
And on that hugely offensive note, we're out of here. See you next week.